shouldn't we have a farmer's market? Why shouldn't we have a trail? Why shouldn't we have a park that is always handicap accessible? Why shouldn't we have those things, not just for certain neighborhoods, but for all neighborhoods across Brownsville?
The cannery, we had a. But I'll wrap up with two things. The cannery was, we had a public engagement session, and we said, what would everybody, what would you call it? What would you name it?
Oh, right.
And I can't remember nobody said cannery. Somebody said canary.
At the end of the day, as a citizen, as someone who's born and raised in this community, it's about accessibility and having options. And I don't just want that for myself. I want that for all of us, right?
And rooted in 21st century values of city design. And what that meant was bringing in infrastructure that was supporting families, that was supporting environmental justice, and that wasn't going to bring more traffic to our community.
And I said, well, I remember telling him, trust me. Just trust me. Just trust.
Take it on faith.
Right? Just
give it a chance.
Give it a chance. It'll work itself out.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Rose Gowen, retired city commissioner for Brownsville, Texas, and I welcome you to segment 2, part 2 of our video podcast journey of the last 16 years and how we work together with a great number of partners and friends to create a vibrant Brownsville. Today, I'm here with 3 of my wonderful friends, and I'd like to have them introduce themselves. Edna?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Edna Ili Ledesma. I'm an associate professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and director of the Kaufman Food Systems Lab for the study and research of marketplaces.
And who is our little guest in your arms?
This is Simon Mauricio, and he's my 1-month-old baby.
And we're working, all of what we do is for him and the generation to come. So I'm glad he was able to join us today. Ramiro?
Ramiro Gonzalez, at the time of all this action, of all these great things that we did, I was in the city planning department and also the director of government and community affairs for the city of Brownsville.
Eva.
My name is Eva Garcia, and when Commissioner Gowen first got elected, I was a student who was using a bicycle as my main form of transportation. And so I was lucky enough to join the planning department early on in 2013 to join this magnificent movement.
So let's start with that. What intersected you with this movement of Merry Men that we had? What was it that sparked your interest?
I think like many of Brownsville's residents, I grew up in a low-income family, and I actually grew up in a colonia south of Southmost. And so when I was working on my bachelor's degree at the university, I had to bicycle as my main form of transportation to get to and from home and classes. And as part of the degree, you need an internship, and I couldn't afford to go to another community or another city, take on an internship. And I really needed to be able to bike to my internship, and Career Services introduced me to the city of Brownsville, where I met Ramiro and some other directors at the time. And that's really where I learned about government work, how the government works, and how really the decision makers impact individuals like myself, and how we live and the quality of life that we have. That's really what got me.
That's terrific. And I think one of the themes we all want to carry through these series is education, and how What we worked on all these years has been rooted in science and education. It wasn't an arbitrary decision, but rather a very intentional decision, listening to students and listening to families all across Brownsville and putting best practices to work in action. So in the segment one, we talked about the beginning of the West Rail Trail fight. The railroad went through West Brownsville for, I think it was 100 years, dividing that neighborhood. And the county was going to move the rail line out of the city, freeing up a corridor. And we talked about how Father Jerry Frank had started talking to the people of West Brownsville and what they wanted. Did they want a toll road? Did they want a road at all? Did they want it to be divided, or did they want to be knit back together? What do you remember in speaking to your mom? I think your mom was one of the original members, wasn't she?
Yeah, no, it's been a long journey, and I think what makes this project incredibly successful and what has made it successful, it's how rooted it has been in the community. And my original connection to it came from my mother being part of I'm a parishioner of St. Joseph's Church. Father Jerry, he actually married me a few years ago. We were part of St. Joseph. We still are part of St. Joseph. But in that work, so much of our faith was rooted in community and activism and thinking about what it meant for our community. I grew up in Riverside, and a neighborhood that was bisected by the rail. And what the rail was going to do, if that rail became a toll road, was essentially cut off our neighborhood with limitations that were already in place because of what was happening when the rail would stop, right? Like the rail would come, it would have to stop to be able to cross over into Mexico. And if there was ever an emergency, people got stranded. People were cut off. There was no lifeline out of our neighborhood. And so we lived that experience every day growing up. So there was a lot of grassroots movements from the front of the West Rail to advocate for something that was more holistic and rooted in 21st century values of city design. And what that meant was bringing in infrastructure that was supporting families, that was supporting environmental justice, and that wasn't going to bring more traffic to our community. So my mom was part of that original group that helped collect over 5,000 signatures, along with many of our friends and people that were part of the first segment. And then I was fortunate to be able to then come in and bring in a level of implementation through research and education. And I'm happy to talk about that if you would like, or we can segment back into it.
Let's loop back to that really briefly, really quickly. But Ramiro, you were with the city of Brownsville already at that time?
Yeah, I think the West Rail Trail was this thing that was politically it was at a standstill. The county didn't want to move. The city, both entities were dug in their positions, whereas the city wanted the trail and the county wanted a road, and the city added the neighborhood. And the county was kind of on its own. It was on an island because it didn't really have a lot of community support. And the city leaders, Mayor Martinez and yourself, you all had the community behind you. So it just, it dawned on me one day. Edna and I met before that, but I know I was in Austin, and I kind of remember I was at a gas station, and it just kind of like clicked on me, and I said, what we need is a planning process that brings together everybody, right? That and it kind of changes that discussion from, the two polar opposites to, having a planning effort that would mend the two, that would bring developers, that would bring students, that would bring the community. And so I remember calling Edna on the way from Austin down. I had just gone to a conference, and I said, Edna, what do you think about this? Maybe we can get Murad's students with your students, and then, we can have a session up here and down there. And so anyways, it all kind of culminated with the city participating, the city coming together with some funds, right? Because, we didn't have a lot of funds, but we were able to get some funds to at least pay for the students' travel, both TSC students to Austin and Austin students to Brownsville, because we really wanted them to not plan in a vacuum of Austin, right? And so we were able to get those. And I really think, I mean, I don't know what you think, Rose, but I think that played the pivotal kind of that point where the discussion started to change. The community started to say, okay, maybe we will accept a road here and there because the design is this way and that way, and we believe in the future of this. And then obviously Commissioner Lopez got elected shortly after that. But I really think that this planning effort is, and there's still a record of it, right? Because there was actually a deliverable from the students. I really think that played the key role to changing the discussions and then moving forward. And obviously, it kind of one of those things that just one of those projects that we agreed to it, and then shortly thereafter the funding was available, and now you see the trail, because it could have taken forever for them.
Oh, I remember when I was first selected, the CCRMA director at the time came to my office and had a giant map, put it up on the wall, and said, "Look at this." And it was a map of Brownsville, and it had this kind of visible corridor where the West Rail Trail was. And he said, "Isn't that the perfect corridor for a road?" And I said, "Well, did you know the rates of diabetes are extremely high in Brownsville? I'm a physician. I work with public health. And so when I look at that map, I see, isn't that a perfect place for a trail?" And he looked at me and he said, "Well, nobody's going to want to walk or ride a bike for 8 miles. And I said, 8 miles is not that far. And who's to say that they're going to do the whole thing in one sitting? Maybe they'll go a mile. Maybe they'll go 5 blocks. Maybe they'll get into shape and be able to do 8 miles. Maybe they'll go 8 miles, have lunch, and go back the other 8 miles. Who knows? Who's to say? But it's a corridor that can increase activity and build community. And so I think he didn't understand me, and I certainly didn't understand him. And so I think a planning effort, as you described, was really the only best way to kind of heal the two factions and bring them together. So tell us about the process. What did you task your students to do?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about sort of the beauty of the idea. And I remember when Ramiro called me that day. I had just been, I began a postdoc fellowship at the University of Texas at Austin, which is where I was at the time, before moving to Wisconsin. And I essentially had free range to teach a class that was interdisciplinary, that had students from planning, architecture, urban design. And then as the professor, I had the power to just designate some kind of real life experience. And it sort of fell on my lap. Ramiro called right when that initiation thinking process began. And he said, he followed the Urban Land Institute. Every year they put together an annual urban design competition. And he said, let's think about the ULI. If the ULI came to Brownsville, I want that kind of momentum in this project. This is what this project deserves. He's like, can we do that? And I said, absolutely. And I remember we met with you. That was the first time I met you, and we talked about what it would take. And one of the things that I still hold in my head was you saying, I'm worried that this is going to open up maybe too many questions. And then you probably don't remember saying this. He's like, is this maybe going to be the right approach? And I think for those of us trained as planners, the more ideas that we had would be the better. And I think that was the challenge when we were coming in, is that people were seeing this as a black and white issue.
Sure.
And the reality is we brought students that work interdisciplinarily across disciplines. They worked with local students from the university, with Dr. Murad Abu Salim and his architecture students, who are extremely gifted and talented, but they also live, this is their experience. And so what we were able to do is have them collaborate directly with my students from Austin, who may or may not have ever been to the Valley.
True.
But so they might have other skills that students that are maybe just starting out in their bachelor's degree or associate's degree didn't have. But the local students had that local knowledge of what does it mean to every day, exactly what you described, get up and say, I have to get on a bike and I have to get from A to B. And so what we were able to position the students to do is think about options. So what options does a family need? What options does a young professional need? What option does an elderly individual need? And how do we begin to articulate that on through visuals, through representation, so that as people see that, they say, this isn't about a road or not a road. It isn't about whether a bus is going to go through the lane or if it's going to be a bike. It's about making sure that through the different multimodal approach, we have a better city. And so our students were able to bring together ideas both in Austin and by visiting the site, meeting with developers, talking to the community and saying, here's how we can move forward, because you all can actually collectively put together a great plan. And that's what we did.
And you're right. I do remember thinking, maybe there will be too many options generated, or maybe the wrong option, quote unquote, wrong, depending on who you ask, would be generated. But that's also part of my growth process, that I learned about planning. I learned not to fear the planning process, because the people, if it's done right, the people are involved, and the community desires and needs are really the most important. So were you involved at all in that planning process? Did you get to see it happen?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I was working under Ramiro, and I think about what you said, the executive director of the Regional Mobility Authority said, which is people don't want to do that. Well, no, I didn't want to bike everywhere. I had to bike everywhere. That wasn't an option for me. I couldn't get a job to buy a car, and you don't just pay for the vehicle, you pay for registration and maintenance and all that comes with owning a vehicle. So, under Ramiro's leadership, we were definitely involved, participated, worked with the students. I remember very clearly them going through understanding kind of, lower Brownsville, downtown core Brownsville versus like central Brownsville versus the North Brownsville, and being part of those stakeholder meetings where we could kind of see that the culture throughout Brownsville really changes in terms of development, in terms of walkability and desire. And so I do remember helping to collect the signatures, being a part of the town halls meetings and helping to prepare presentations for that. And I think we looked at some examples of where there were highways that got removed, and highways in other cities and other states that divided communities, similarly like what a toll road I think would have done. And what really can happen in terms of placemaking if you can create a space that is walkable and bikeable. And so, again, going back to, I was, 10 years younger, 15 years younger. And so I think the educational piece that came from not just hearing the students, but kind of learning about the whole process and being part of developing town halls and hearing the community engagement and all of those public comments, it was really an educational moment for me to begin my planning journey.
And you mentioned the town halls. We had, 2 or 3, I believe?
Well, yeah.
And I was always worried that no one would show up, or there'd be 5 people in the seats, and it wouldn't make the impact that we had hoped. But they were all full. I remember them being filled. Every seat was interesting.
They were all full, but they weren't necessarily getting anywhere. Toward the end, right? It was more just voicing, and it wasn't really moving the needle. And I think, I also had community people tell me, we don't trust the process. And I said, well, I remember telling them, trust me, just trust me, just trust.
Take it on faith.
Right? Just
give it a chance.
Give it a chance. It'll work itself out. And I think it really was kind of one of these pivotal moments for the West Rail, and we made it happen. Right. And so,
well, I think the students made it happen. I really do think that your students and Dr. Abuslim's students were very talented, and I remember the day you were going to make the presentation, or they were going to make the presentation, and there were developers that came that were very toll road friendly. And I was nervous about that, but it worked out, and they listened, and they had thoughtful comments.
Well, I think a lot of what we did, or a lot of what we accomplished, I think we don't talk a lot about that partnership between TSC and the city, because it kind of went under the radar, right? But allowing students to participate in the studio, and then at the end come up with a design, and then at the end present that to the public. I've always said it. It's one thing if I were presenting to the public at the time, let's say, or you or anybody here, right? If you're a city employee, you're wearing the city target, right? And usually that means people are against you or
Suspicious.
There's lack of trust or whatever, right? But I think this partnership, we did Market Square, we did Belden Trail, we did 6th Street. There's a lot. I think the last time I calculated, there was about more than $10 million in projects implemented and executed that started in the lab, that started in a studio.
True.
Right. And so, I think the ability for people to see, once you put a student up there presenting, well, that's the cannery was another one, right? That's much different than a city official telling you, hey,
this is what's going to happen. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, to your point, I feel like you said, it wasn't going anywhere because in a way the city was like tallying who wants this, who wants that. And what the partnership and the collaboration did was allow us to paint a picture, paint a vision that the city really wasn't painting for our options.
And I think one of the things that was really critical to the conversation was not only bringing in a way, an outsider, right? Because yes, I'm an outsider to some extent because I was bringing a group from Austin. I grew up in Brownsville, so there's a level of trust. But I think it was really important for the students, both the TSC students and my students, to listen to the concerns of the community, to get the community feedback that you guys had done. And then in the final presentation, those developers, what allowed them to have buy-in was there were some concerns that essentially what the students were able to do is go back and say, oh, you're worried about traffic counts? Here's a study.
Yeah.
There was the data that actually demonstrates that you don't need that kind of high capacity road at XYZ intersection. And yet you can still do the following thing. Here's an environmental study that begins to show how a transition from a trail to this kind of development can allow for XYZ, right? So data really mattered, and research was able to do that for the project.
No question about it.
And I don't think it's ever been done again, right? At UT, something like that?
No, I mean, I think what made that happen was you called someone that had the ability to basically do that partnership, right? You called me. So, and in the same way, I've tried to do these projects. I think we've had conversations about this. I've worked on these projects in Wisconsin, and one of the things that's been really difficult is you talk about communities that, turn their backs on the process. I worked on a project in Chicago in the Pilsen neighborhood, similar approach. We work with a nonprofit. We were working on a Rails to Trails project. That project has been in the works for 20 years and still nothing has happened. So it's not just the students coming in. I think it was so important that you all and the city and all the nonprofits were able to actually bring money to make it happen. Yes, the plan was critical and bring in buy-in, but then bringing in those grants and actually getting it to work. That's what the community, they saw the impact.
I think if there's anything I've learned in this role is that timing is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And time is needed for many things. So it's not as simple as being elected and saying you're going to do something and before the 4 years is out, you've done it, because many things take more than 4 years. And so timing, having the right partners, having the right milieu, if you will, is everything in work like this. I do want to shift a bit over to the other next trail that we did, which was the Southmost Nature Trail, which is your baby. Tell us about that.
Well, coming, biking every day for years, I would come through Southmost. I would have to take back roads like Monsi's Road and Paula Road. And as an intern, working with the grants department, the parks department, and the planning department, I remember one day, and I had no idea how anything worked. When I think about it now, just your average citizen not paying attention to government and commission meetings and how actions and funding occurs. But Ramiro put a map out on a table and said, hey, you bike every day, where would you build a trail? And I was like, well, I've always passed this drainage ditch. And there, in my mind as a citizen, I was like, there's all this space that nobody uses, that nobody's allowed to get on. And I said, why can't we put a trail along this canal because Southmost is very dense. It's very developed, all along, Southmost Boulevard. And there just wasn't, I didn't see any other space. But of course, that being the area that I bike through all the time, connecting the university to high school schools, we looked at it and did a little study. And I was still a student at the time. And we, counted like 8 schools between elementaries, middle schools, high schools, and all of the residents that lived along there. And Ramiro said, you know what, that's a drainage corridor. It's a public easement. It's publicly owned and managed. And let's see what we can do. And that the funding, at the time we had the Brownsville Metropolitan Planning Organization. And if you're not familiar, an MPO are federally mandated, and they get a specific amount of federal transportation dollars to program to, obviously, transportation planning and issues. And so there was this category of funding that we applied for. And CCRMA, the Regional Mobility Authority, our county, our city, typically applied for roads only. And so during this one call for projects, I remember talking to the MPO director at the time, Mr. Mark Lunn. Kudos to him. He was a great teacher also. He said, well, you're going to have to do some kind of cost-benefit ratio analysis. You're going to have to kind of prove why this funding that is so critically needed for roads should be used to build a trail. And I did. I had to, look at some data, look at some case studies, some examples, and find a formula that worked to defend funding the Southmost Nature Trail. And with Ramiro and Commissioner Gowen and all of our elected official support at the time, we were able to get an MOU with the Drainage District, and we built that first phase, I believe with BCIC funds and maybe some CDBG funds, some community development block grant funds, from Porter High School to Del Castillo Elementary School on Morningside. And that was the first phase that...
And now we're still building it.
We're still building it.
Yeah.
And going to hook it up to the historic battlefield trail.
Correct. Yeah. Once it's all complete and federal transportation funding works like that, I have to say, we'll be able to bike from Southmost Boulevard and Monsie's Road. If you're familiar with Aiken and Benavides way out there, deep Southmost, all the way to the historic battlefield trail.
And Los Fresnos.
Once it connects, you'll be able to go all the way past 511 and very close to Los Fresnos, who is building their own hike and bike trail. And so that's part of kind of how I think these seeds of movements and education and learning for me from the Vibrant Brownsville lecture series from the very beginning, the Better Blocks, Build a Better Blocks, all of that momentum to me has really been contagious to this potential countywide network, and connecting our hike and bike network to Los Fresnos.
And we're able to now connect, because of these efforts, schools and parks,
right?
The Southmost Library,
right?
And the National Battlefield up at 511, and so many options that people have now, so that you have choices. I own a car, but I also own a bike, and I own sneakers. So sometimes I want to take a walk. Sometimes I want to ride my bike. Sometimes I want to drive a car. Yeah. I should have, as a resident of every city, but particularly Brownsville, I should have the option to do whichever I want in a safe way. Your what is it? Your zip code should not determine your longevity. And so the things, choices. That's right, or your choices. So the things that we may look for and enjoy on a vacation, we should be able to find in our home. And that's really the basis of what we all work for. Is why shouldn't we have a farmer's market? Why shouldn't we have a trail? Why shouldn't we have a park that is always handicap accessible? Why shouldn't we have those things, not just for certain neighborhoods, but for all neighborhoods across Brownsville?
Yeah, I remember it a little differently, but I'd swear I remember Eva just being like, hey, there's this corridor that I want, there's this corridor. And I was just kind of like, what are you talking about?
That probably happened. Then you pulled out a map. And I was like, you're like, where are you? Show me.
Here, show me where you're going. Show me where you want to go. And sure enough, I mean, yeah, there's a long process, but I mean, that was we from a vision to the first grant was maybe 2 years. And then the Category 7 money, and it actually survived the MPO merger.
That's true.
Right?
It's true.
And so it's still with us today. Eva went and worked for the MPO, now she's back at the city.
And we're still doing it.
And you're still doing it.
I'm literally still working on it.
It's interesting. I mean, that's why I think we're here, right? Because it's really important for people to remember where it is that things started.
Yeah.
Right. And where it is, how they started, because I think a lot of people, that you just forget. Time happens, life happens, people change, people leave, people go. And, that you don't really, especially in a bureaucracy or in a city, right? A lot of people have left. And so you lose kind of that institutional knowledge.
Exactly. And
that specifically.
Such a pleasure, such a blessing for you to have started the project. And now you're back to Brownsville. I mean, you never left Brownsville.
Finish it.
But you went to work for other entities, and now you're back to see it through to the end and sit on the state Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So really an interesting journey that brought great knowledge to all of us.
Throughout all of it, and the reason why I'm still doing what I do, I think it's funny. I thought I was going to be a park ranger. I was studying environmental science, right? But I got lucky. Timing is everything.
Everything.
But through all of it, and the reason why I came back to Brownsville and the reason why I sit on that statewide Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee is, at the end of the day, as a citizen, as someone who's born and raised in this community, it's about accessibility and having options. And I don't just want that for myself. I want that for all of us, right? It's having that ability to not be locked into your neighborhood, to not, if you can't afford a car or have access to one or something, that you're not limited in opportunity because of a lack of access or options. And that if we can provide that as a government agency, through bureaucracy, through leadership of our commission, then we really are serving the public in that.
I remember I went to Canada recently, and I was on a trail network, and the signage was not trail network, it was transportation corridor. So they consider their trails and sidewalks and roads as all transportation. And I thought that was so distinctive. Just the difference of one word almost very much so adds more legitimacy to the existence of a trail. It's not just a trail, it's transportation. And then you tell a wonderful story about your wife's grandmother in Peru who walks and is active because there's a military compared to a grandmother here that may not to tell.
Oh, well, it's a lifestyle, right? So if we have my grandma passed away, but her grandma still lives. Same age, same year. Only difference is she lives in a city where she walks to church every day and walks to the market, and has not lost that independence at age 95 or however old, 96, I think now. My grandmother, one day she got lost driving, and then the next day my aunts took away the keys. And basically, it was a slow downhill, but it was, and that's the difference. The lifestyle, being able to walk anywhere, and then choosing to walk as well, right?
I remember at one of the town halls, an older woman came up to me and she said, "Thank you so much for what you're doing and fighting for." And I said, "Well, thank you for coming out tonight." I told her it was, it's very nice that you're here, and where do you live? And she told me where she lived. And I said, and do you mind me asking, how old are you? And she said a number much older than she looked. And I said, "Well, you look terrific." And she said, "Well, I walk to buy my milk and my bread every day. And if you let them build a road, I won't be able to walk and buy my milk every day." And I thought, okay, that lady said it all, right? We as leaders, and I count us all as leaders, have to concern ourselves with an attention to not just bringing in the billion-dollar jobs and stuff like that, but all very important, but also what about these folks that either can't drive a car or don't want to drive a car or want to walk to buy their milk and bread? That should be something that we count as a priority just as much as everything else.
All ages of legitimate mode of movement.
Yeah,
that's important.
Well, and I think you're talking about timing. You can go back. All that goes. You can go back to that specific comment about timing, and I mean, had Edna not been in the exact position she was in, maybe we couldn't have done the plan, right? Eva started at the grants department. She ended up at the planning department. And she interned for like 4 years. I don't know how long you interned.
I interned for like a year and a half. I literally part-time. She loved it. And really, well, the bike barn helped having that extra activity and space. I mean, to your point, it's all ages and abilities. And when I was interning at the grants department, grant writing isn't that fun. Sorry to break your heart. But working with the parks department, they said, hey, you bike. There's this vacant property that we want to activate. And the idea is that anybody can volunteer to earn a bike. And I loved that idea as a cyclist, teaching the skills that you need to fix a bike, which is way more affordable than fixing a car, and I think we got kids from the barrio. We got kids who, lived with multi-generationals living in their family, no AC. Maybe they didn't have those video games and TVs in their home. And so, creating a space and activating vacant spaces. I mean, I just got lucky. The timing really worked out. And I mean, to your point, whether you're, your grandparent age and you're taking care of kids, this isn't just for the people who pass the driver's license exam. This is for all ages, all abilities, create a space to live a life.
And maybe you go even further, right? The university decided to establish an architecture program.
True.
Yeah.
And then they hired
a
Murad, right? I'll tell the story about the cannery, right? Because the cannery is a project that died 7 times. From the time we purchased it to the time that it's still currently somewhat under construction. But the one time it died, I had the thought officially it died. Like we took it up to commission. 2 commissioners were against it, and they said, they were basically saying it's like the farmers market is an elitist thing. Right? I don't know if you remember this, but
I do
remember. And so it got voted down. I can't remember what happened. I was like, oh, it's dead. It's dead. And I remember a year and a half later, the UTRGV used to have a government affairs Friday, like one Friday a month, and they would cycle through different organizations and stuff. And so they ended up, the one time was they hosted at the food bank.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I was like, what the hell is the food bank to the RGV? I had no idea what it was. But I told Vero, I was like, hey, let's go. And so she went with me. And I'm at the food bank, and they're talking about like how HEB donates and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, how the hell I didn't know about this?
No one did.
Yeah. So I remember. And why isn't there not one in Brownsville?
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And I remember I left that spot and I told Vero, there's our equity piece. Right? We got to find a way to get them engaged. And sure enough, I called them. It took about a year and a half, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the cannery is a 10-year project. But that component was the one that was like, okay, this project's...
That was the silver bullet.
Bulletproof.
The silver bullet,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't argue with it. And so hopefully, I mean, now I think we're at the cusp of a really good thing. I posted a picture the other day of my daughter in front of it, and I thought it was kind of cool because, 8-9 years later, you're still here. Yeah.
And I think what's really critical too about that, that comment that as somebody who studies farmers markets, that people see it as something that is elitist, but it's also a place of choice. And specifically thinking about downtown, in that time frame that you bringing the project on the table, the HEB, the one grocery store downtown, has closed.
True.
And so there's such a need for not just the farmers market, but for there to be a significant anchor, a food hub. And that's what the cannery is going to be. And I'm so excited for it to come to life. And it has been a long time coming, but it's going to be great.
Yeah. And I mean, the EDA, the amount of partners.
The board is almost not big enough to fit all the partners that we got together.
And I remember like talking to Judy Quisenberry, and she's like, Ramiro, I need you to do it in like a year.
Oh, yeah, right.
Right. And I'm like, fortunately, I'm not at the city anymore. I don't have to report to Judy. right? But I'm pretty sure she's going to be excited. I mean, the results are going to be cool. And
It'll be worth the wait.
I forget this is Edna's life. She studies farmers markets, so
And you brought me into that work.
yeah, absolutely.
You brought me into working with Veto and the Brownsville Wellness Coalition, and I actually began that project with them through a small foundation grant to collect data. I've been doing it for I think I was like, I got pregnant with my first kid. He's 2.5, and I had a second kid. And I'm like, we're still not in the cannery. We're still not in the cannery. And the whole point was that I was going to be collecting data for a year to then collect data in the cannery to then see the transformation of like, what's our difference in vendors? What's our population? Who are we serving? And I'm like, I'm still there. You see me.
You are. And there's a little tablet.
I'm just like, I want to make sure we know the impact. And so I have 4 years of data of who's been coming to the market.
And I was
important.
telling Monica, because we went to go look at it, right, for this thing, right? And I mean, if you go and you walk on the linear park side, you just see, I mean, and by the way, Jesse's the architect, right? And so another funny story is, well, two stories on the cannery. One story is there's a pergola there that it's a beautiful pergola.
Oh, that's a good story.
Right? It's a beautiful pergola. But very few people know that actually that pergola was supposed to be installed at Market Square.
That's right.
Right. And so I remember when we were designing it, I called the parks department. I was like, and the city manager at the time, he cut it out because it was already ordered, delivered, and he made a decision to cut it out because some people told him to cut it out.
Because of historic, it was
historic, whatever.
That the original building did not have the pergola, so it shouldn't. But go ahead.
So luckily they stored it, and so when we were designing it, I was like, we got to bring that thing. I mean, we already paid for it. 6 years later, we still have it. It hasn't been installed anywhere.
It hasn't rusted or anything.
So that now it's installed and it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
Actually, they were like, "Oh, all these vines are going to grow." I was like, "Yeah, that's the idea." Yeah.
That's kind of how pergola works.
So we recycle at the city too.
Yeah, you save it for 6 years and it didn't rust because it was good, right?
I love it.
So, and then the other thing is, you'll see that there's kind of this outdoor kitchen, right?
Yes.
And not only that idea comes from, if you go to the Pearl at the San Antonio, they have sort of this outdoor kitchen. They obviously have the Culinary Institute of America, but in my mind, we always have these, speaking of gathering places and making the place special, every weekend, sure enough, we have, chicken plate fundraisers or burger fundraisers or whatever kind of fundraisers. And I always, when I thought about that kitchen, I thought about kind of those type of events also coming together at Linear Park, right?
And then the Liddies came in and did that beautiful park next to it.
Yeah, exactly. So now you see this whole
really collaborative project. And although I said it as a joke, the board really isn't big enough to list all the partners that were involved. But we're close. Let's just say we're close to the end of that journey. And Edna definitely has to be here for the ribbon cutting when that happens. And then finally, we have to say a word about the League of American Bicyclists designation. Tell us what that is, Edna. Eva.
The League of American Bicyclists is a national nonprofit, and they have this Bicycle Friendly America program. And so throughout the nation, when you do these type of efforts, you can be designated and recognized for all that you're doing for this designation. So again, we're talking about 2012, 2013, 14. Finally, in 2015, we had done enough work to apply for this designation. And on our first try, we're successful in being awarded a bronze level designation, which throughout the state of Texas, there's only one community that has silver designation. It's the Woodlands. We can't compete, but the bronze level designation really helps to communicate, to bring in the tourism. I mean, everything we're talking about is so true. We're doing it for our residents, right? We're transforming previously vacant spaces, unused land, whether it's on the drainage canal or on a railroad corridor, in the Kwanzaa hut, and all of these areas that were previously not being utilized to the best of their ability, maximized. And by programming them and activating these spaces and bringing in placemaking for people, really we've been recognized. And so bicycle friendly community designation, I think attracts tourism, attracts outside investment, and kind of helps to elevate our efforts and bring it to a national platform. And so we're very proud of that designation. I think it's one of several under your leadership that we've been able to achieve. We're going to apply one more time next year. Hopefully we'll be able to get silver. We're working on that through the city right now. But to your point, I think all of the on-street infrastructure, the off-street infrastructure, and the continued engagement with the community and providing access and opportunities, I think, is really what elevates that. And
I think that we're, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we are going to get the silver, because now we also have trail counters. And so we know that 250,000 users were on the Battlefield Trail into 2024. We don't know West Rail Trail yet because the counters haven't gotten in. But very soon, those counters are going to go in. And then I think there'll be a competition, which trail has the most users. We'll all have to ride both of them and make sure we all get down up, so to speak.
I forgot one more story.
Okay, one more, and then we got to wrap it up.
Oh, so we had the cannery. We had a. I'll wrap up with two things. The cannery was, we had a public engagement session, and we said, what would everybody, what would you call it? What would you name it?
Oh, right.
And I can't remember nobody said cannery. Somebody said canary, right? They misspelled it, right? Because we had said, obviously, it was an old canning facility. And I said, the cannery. So that's how it ended up. The first version was the canary.
Well, we are
right?
a birding center.
Yeah, I know. That kind of made sense.
Another designation.
That's right.
And I mean, and I'll end at this point. I got to go back to the timing thing. You got to think about, like, what if so and so wasn't elected or so and so wasn't. I mean, this could not have happened without, support throughout, right? And major support, right? Market Square was funded by a lawsuit from AEP. Think about that, right? Like, we didn't have any money, but we had this Mayor Martinez had, solved a lawsuit, and $3 million appeared to do Market Square, right? I mean, timing.
Yeah, the right people in the right spots. Timing is both of those things are absolutely important. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today for some more good stories as we try to tell you not just the stories, but the recipe, the roadmap. How can magic happen in a city like Brownsville? And we're letting you know how that happened and how it can be done again and continued. Have a great day.